On this episode, I want to begin with a story that is older than our arguments that we go back and forth with as a society. It's older than the internet, older than modern psychology, older than the language we use for intuition, channeling, subconscious mind, or even spiritual experience, because there was a time in our history that spiritual experience was a fact of life. It is the old human story of people gathering in uncertainty and asking for guidance through writing. And I want to be clear at the beginning, this is not just a made up type of tale. This is a real tradition. There are documented religious traditions in Chinese history, in particular, built around spirit writing, often called Fuji or Fu Luan. In these traditions, people gathered at altars not only to ask private questions, but to seek moral instruction, guidance, and meaning during times of crisis. In some communities, the writing was received through a planchetic like instrument and then reeled out and recorded. In other words, this was not simply someone scribbling in a notebook, it was a communal act of listening, interpretation, and preservation. Scholars describe spirit writing in these traditions as a real religious and social practice used to produce teachings, moral texts, and responses to chaos. When you hear automatic writing today, the people often imagine only one thing: a private mystical experience, a strange silence, or a modern self help technique. But historically, writing as revelation has only functioned as folklore in action. Not just stories people told, but rituals people performed when the world felt unstable. When crops failed, when politics turned violent, when illness spread, when ordinary answers were not enough. People gathered, they asked, they waited, something moved, and then someone wrote it down. That is folklore in the deepest sense, not just as entertainment, as I always say, but a method of surviving uncertainty. And then when we move forward into the modern West, we find a different setting, but a familiar pattern. In 1913, in St. Louis, a woman named Pearl Curran became associated with one of the most famous automatic writing and spirit communication cases in modern memory, the case of Patience Worth. According to the accounts, the communication began through a Ouija board, which I don't recommend using. And the voice that emerged introduced itself in a dramatic, old fashioned style, the kind of opening that people remembered because it felt like a personality had entered the room. Smithsonian's account notes Pearl Curran began channeling Patience Worth in 1913 and describes how the case grew into a national fascination. And what made that case endure was not only the claim, it was the output. Pages and pages, poems, conversations, stories, a speaking voice with a tone, vocabulary, rhythm, and attitude people found difficult to dismiss as random noise. Some people said spirit, some said consciousness or subconsciousness genius, some said fraud, some said performance, some said psychology was witnessing something it did not yet know how to name. And that argument, spirit or subconscious, revelation or automatism, is with uh, us now. Britannica's summary of automatic writing captures that exact tension. Historically, many attribute it to external or supernatural forces, while later psychological theories framed it as internal, unconscious processes. That is why this topic belongs on a show like this, because folklore is where human beings keep their oldest questions alive, even after the language changes. What speaks when the hand begins to move? What part of us answers? And what arises when we become quiet enough to listen? And how do we tell the difference between noise, memory, imagination, and something that feels like guidance? There's another old pattern to this too, the pattern of age. In youth, we run to prove ourselves, we run to build a life, we run because speed feels like purpose. But there comes a time in life, and it is not a defeat, it is a threshold when running gives way to listening. Not because life is over, because a deeper chapter begins. A chapter where a person has lived enough to hear differently and to ask better questions, and to recognize what is performative and what is real. To know that not every silence is empty, and to know that not every message is wisdom. To know that discernment is part of devotion. That is the image I want to begin with tonight. The, the last lantern on the road, the page open on the table, and a person who has lived long enough to sit with both mystery and responsibility. Tonight's guest stands at that crossroads, later life wisdom, deep listening, and automatic writing. So tonight we begin at the lantern with the page open. Arthur Thomas Ware. Welcome to Folklore After Dark.
Thank you, Benton. It's great to be here.
Can you please introduce yourself and explain to everyone a little bit more about what you do and your outlook, whatever you'd like to share to open up with?
Right. Well, I was born in England in 1936, prior to World War II, and of course came to Australia in 1951 as a migrant. Started work on the day after my 15th birthday. Worked for 44 years and then took voluntary redundancy at 59. And I turn 90 in April this year.
Oh
I became interested in automatic writing this way. A friend of mine working on the night shift at Sydney Airport, we used to be in telecommunications, air traffic control, that type of work. He said, Tom, you like writing poetry, don't you? And I said, yes. And he said, I think you could be a sensitive. And I said, what the hell do you mean by that? He said, well, sensitives, they can sometimes contact spirits and all this sort of thing. And I said, oh, don't kid me, mate. He said, look, why don't you give it a go? And I said, well, what do you have to do? And he said, well, first of all, don't trust anyone else. Do it for yourself. So he recommended that I start by placing a small thimble-like glass on top of a smooth glass top table and putting my finger on it in the middle of the night and seeing if there's any spirits there. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty rubbishy to me, but I'll give it a go. So I came home from the night shift. It was about midnight. Family fast asleep in bed. Mum and I had 3 kids by that stage. And I sat there very self-consciously, put my finger on this thimble and sort of said, come on, spirits, come on, show me something. And of course, nothing happened. So I told my friend the next day, nothing happened. He said, well, be patient, Tom, try again. So the second night I stayed there and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go this time. And the second night I really relaxed and I thought, come on, if there's anything there, move it. And of course, I felt this energy through my right arm, just moving this little glass. And I thought immediately, you would think, that's my subconscious mind, wishful thinking. I know that, no one's there. And I told my friend, and he said, all right, well, why don't you put a little notice under the glass and put a yes, no answer and ask if there's any spirits there, you see. So I put my finger on the glass again and I thought, I'll be open-minded about this. And suddenly the glass just did a little tiny half circle to one side. And I thought, oh no, that's me, wishful thinking, pushing. So then I asked a question, is anyone there? And of course, it pushed straight across to yes. And then I realized that the house I lived in, a woman had died in the same room I was in. No, it's the bedroom of the house I was in some time earlier. And I told my friend, he said, well, she's probably still there. Her ghost is there. She doesn't know she's dead yet. So I tried it again. And do you live here? Yes. And I said, well, you don't need to live here anymore. And she went. So I never heard from her again. But this got me to the stage where I thought, well, my friend was pushing me along this line. He said, why don't you try automatic writing? And I said, what's that? He said, well, you just hold a pen in your hand, you ask a question, and you wait for the answer to come. So I tried this. I put the pen on the paper and asked if there was anything there, and nothing happened. And then after about the second day, the end of the pen, not the pen, the point on the paper, but the top of the pen gave a little waggle around clockwise and then around the other wise. And I thought, am I doing that? If I am, I'm not feeling it. At the same time, it almost felt as though another arm was being pushed into and through my arm, working the muscles. It was a very strange sensation. And I got a bit worried about it, actually.
Okay.
This is a takeover. But anyway, I bore with it. And what happened is I'd have a piece of paper. I would hold the pen in my hand and ask if there was anyone there. And first of all, I got nothing. And then I got a series of E-L, 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 as though someone was trying to learn handwriting through me, right? This went on for a couple of days. Now, what happened? There was no grammatical punctuation. It would just go E-L right across the page, and when it got to the other side of the page, it would whip back to the next line and continue on, like a mechanic, like a robot almost. And then eventually I got a word in there, partial word. It looked like electricity. And I said, is this electricity? And it stopped. And after that, I gradually got words. And eventually I was introduced to 3, what you might call entities. One of them was my younger brother, who'd been killed in an accident, on a motorcycle accident a bit earlier. One was a little girl I knew as a child, who apparently she must have died because she would have been the same age as me. And the other one was a fellow claiming to be, what was his name? John Willoughby. Now, John Willoughby claimed that he knew me in a previous lifetime in the American Civil War.
Okay.
When we were friends.
Now, all right.
I didn't believe any of this. I thought this is my subconscious mind making it all up, right?
Well, just a quick question. Well, back then, things like, previous lives weren't really kind of thought about within the public kind of conscious. It wasn't as prominent in the West, correct? So
absolutely.
I'm thinking you may have never really even maybe have heard of such a thing.
No, I'd heard of it because
okay.
Around about before I started automatic writing, this friend of mine, his name was Rex, he introduced me to a book. Actually, it was a book on theosophy. You heard of theosophy, the Theosophical Society?
I know.
I read the book from cover to cover, and everything in that book made sense to me. It made, reincarnation, laws of karma, and all this stuff that you get from so-called Eastern religions made far more sense to me than what I'd learned in the Christian religion I'd been brought up with. So I had heard of it before, yes. Yeah.
All right. All right. Go ahead and continue. I didn't mean to
Well,
interrupt.
okay, no, that's fine. Interrupt at any time. So what happened then? I commenced this automatic writing, and obviously I was open to all manner of what you might call frivolous entities who realized I was very naive. And I can recall getting a message. There was a little child apparently missing or abducted in Sydney. And I got this message: phone the police. That person is now on such and such a corner and such a street. Would you believe it? I went along to a public telephone box, phoned the police, remained anonymous, told them where this child, so-called child, was, came back, looked at my street directory. There was no such street. Just playing a joke on me. And there was lots of ha-ha-ha's, you see. And then around about this time, a fellow came into my life. He said, I'm your spirit guide, and my name is, and he only gave the initials UR, just the initials UR, which made me think, aha, UR, that's me. Which he came back and he said, no, not you at all. My UR, and he spelled out his name, and it was a terrifically long name with about 15 letters in each. And he said, I have never lived on planet Earth. That's what he said. I have never lived on your planet, but I know all about it, and I am your spirit guide, or words to that effect. And from there on, I never had any trouble, because whenever I did automatic writing for many years, I would do automatic writing and he would come on straight away, and he would introduce to me the people who were going to talk through my automatic writing. And this is what happened. So I had no trouble. And around about, after I've been doing it, I started in a few days before Christmas in 1968. By about 1972, I'd moved to New Zealand, and I started to write a book called Ghost Guidance and Automatic Writing. And that book is actually extant. I can send you a copy if you want it. And it gives the whole story. It gives the whole story of my development. But as the time went on, how could I put it? The profundities of the messages which came through became more and more meaningful, serious. And in that book, Ghost Guidance and Automatic Writing, many people came through to me, and I recorded them. Some were not very well known. Some weren't known to me at all. Some were. I mean, there was a fellow called JBS Haldane. Apparently he's quite a figure back in the 1930s. And there were Ernest Hemingway came through, regretting that he'd committed suicide, saying it was the worst thing he'd ever done. Carl Jung came through several times, actually. And there were different people. A fellow called Myers, who was into automatic writing himself. So there was lots and lots of stuff. And then after a while, probably about 10 years ago, UR dropped away, and he said, I've been superseded by a fellow, you can call him Hector. Now, I worked out that Hector is really my own highest self. My own highest self is, and I call him Hector. Now, I remained skeptical probably for the first 10 years that I was doing this. And one thing happened to change all of that, and I'll tell you what it was. In 1968, I started to write a novel called Search Time Expired. Now, Search Time Expired was a book set against an aviation background in Papua New Guinea in the 1960s, because I'd actually done a whole year in a place called Madang in northern New Guinea, which is really, in those days, it was a tiny little place, but it had a very busy airport, probably one of the busiest airports in Papua New Guinea. And my job was an air ground operator, was to look after aircraft in the air, aircraft separation and that sort of thing. So I wrote a book, a fictitious book, with a fellow who was very disconsolate and upset with his position as an air traffic controller in Madang. But I called the place Nambis. I had a fictitious name for the town. I called it Nambis. And in the book, which I'd been writing for probably a couple of years, because in those days there were no word processors. You sat down at the manual typewriter, you put in 3 pieces of paper and some carbon, you double spaced and you typed the whole manuscript, then you'd go back and correct it. It'd take you a year to do what you could do now in 2 months, right? So I knew this manuscript back to front, everything about it. And then one day, a message came through from my maternal grandmother, who I've never met. She was born in India and lived in India. And she asked a question, and this staggered me. She said, Arthur, that's my first name, Arthur, where is Nambis? And I nearly fell off my chair. And I thought, if she doesn't know where Nambis is and she's a part of me, there's something funny going on here. And that was the beginning when I thought, well, actually, we are different people altogether. These are entities separate from me. But I'm going to qualify that with a remark. In Neil Donald Walsh's books, you've probably heard of Neil Donald Walsh, you have?
I have not, actually.
I tell you what, you're missing out on the most profound automatic typing in the world today. Neil Donald Walsh's books, Conversations with God, Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, have sold millions of copies. Millions of copies have been read. And in his book, in Book 1, God explains to him what he calls the divine dichotomy. The divine dichotomy
I've heard of
of course,
this. Go ahead.
We're all separate and we are all one. Now, we can't get our rational minds around that. But there are many analogies, such as the waves on the ocean, right? Each person's a wave, comes up, looks around, sees other waves, they're all looking different. But what's below? The sea, all conjoined. There are many. I tell one, which I talk about, is imagine the Antarctic Ocean. It's interspersed with icebergs floating all over the place, right? Now, the tip of the iceberg, the 12% above, could be regarded as the individual conscious mind of a person, their conscious memories and so forth. But their subconscious, their personal subconscious, is the 88% below the water, right? They look around, the consciousness part sees the other consciousness part. Oh, it's separate from me. There's distance between us. It would take time for me to get from here to there, right? But underneath, what are they all made of? The same thing, aren't they? Water. The bit above the iceberg's water, the bit below the water's water, and the water joining them all together is water. And what's the difference? Nothing, except the rate of vibration. Make sense?
It
the rate
does.
of vibration is higher in the conscious part above, in the warmer air, so forth. So that's how it works. That's the way I try to explain it.
That's a good analogy. I like it. So I find it interesting that very early on you were taught a sort of discernment. I see a lot of much younger channelers who aren't really doing too well balance wise, and they are channeling things that are not helpful. I've seen this a lot. I would say that it's the majority. What would you say to that? And what would you say to discernment in general and why it's important?
I would say the channel, the people you draw to you, the entities to draw to you, are a reflection of your character.
Mm.
The only way you can raise that level is you have to raise your level. You have to become more genuine, more loving, more caring, less selfish, less I am and all this sort of stuff. In other words, gradually diminish the ego if you can. Raise your standard, because as you raise your standard, the standard of communication will be raised too. It's a case of like always draws like.
Mm.
If you're in it for the glamour, or you think I just want to get lots of likes and this type of thing, to me, that's very shallow. Now, I'm not saying that I reached my level quickly. It took me many years. I've been doing this for, as I said, since 1968. But probably from about after a few years, after very few years, I got genuine. And after that, around about the time UR came in, and he came in very shortly, probably after 6 months of being fiddled around a bit. UR came along, maybe even earlier than that. And from there on, he looked after me and saw that I didn't get into any trouble. Make sense?
It does make sense. And did you do this as your profession, or was this an extra type of curricular activity, or how would you say? Are you a professional writer? Um, what was your
No.
livelihood?
My livelihood from the time I was 15 to the time I was 41 was really telecommunications. I've worked 3 years for the post office back in the old days when they used to send Morse code between stations. They used to use Morse code. And then I joined the Navy, became a radio operator,
All
served
right.
in the Navy on various ships, an aircraft carrier, a frigate, a couple of small ships, naval depots. Finished my time and joined the Department of Civil Aviation as an air ground operator. Now, most of the radio operators in the Australian Navy, when they were getting out at that time, were joining the Civil Aviation Department because it had air radio stations all over Australia, Papua New Guinea, Cocos Islands, Fiji, and all over the place. And
All
of course,
right.
they're all gone now since GPS and that sort of thing has come in. Then, when I finished with them, I joined the New Zealand Post and Telegraphs, doing much of the same sort of work. I came back from there and I joined the New South Wales Police Force as a civilian radio operator, doing radio work in the radio, bringing car chases and bank hold-ups and all that stuff.
All right.
And then I did a year down the Antarctic as an expeditioner, full year
Wow.
on Macquarie Island as a radio operator. When I came home from there, I joined the Overseas Telecommunications Commission to carry on with that work, but it was already becoming redundant.
Hmm.
Once the satellites went up, air radio and all that sort of stuff changed completely. So then I just did a clerical job, just an office job from then until I retired. 17 years with the Commonwealth government.
And you have two YouTube channels. You have one that's primarily about automatic writing, and you have another about um, retirement.
That's right.
I titled this episode "Living Forward" because, well, it just seems suitable. What does that term "living forward" mean to you, and what is your retirement channel about?
Well, when I first started that channel, it wasn't about retirement at all. It was about all sorts of philosophical topics, such as we're talking about now.
Mhm.
And then one day I made a video called Why It's Best to Retire Early. And for some reason or other, it hit the jackpot. It got about 4,000 views. And my son, my younger son, who's right into SEO, he said, Dad, stick to the same subject, don't change it, keep talking about retirement. and you'll watch how it builds up, which I did. And so it became a retirement channel. And I placed many videos on retirement and got lots and lots of feedback, good feedback. But then I decided to start this second channel only a couple of months ago, not knowing how well it'd do. And it started off very slowly. And then quite recently, I think about 3 videos ago, I put one on and it got about 3,500 views. So obviously, some people do like to follow messages on automatic writing. Perhaps not all of them, but some of them. So I thought I'll keep both channels going.
All right. And are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it immensely. I still do a lot of public speaking before groups. And as far as YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, various other channels, I've placed 2,500 of these talking head videos. And I've had about 3 or 4 podcasts like this, various levels. So obviously, what I have to talk about and what I have to say is of use. I also do a lot on storytelling and on public speaking, because I've been into Toastmasters International since 1972 and have given presentations at various conferences, at big district conferences. So I'm a fairly experienced speaker and experienced, not podcaster as such, but certainly as a person happy to come along and talk like this.
Well, being able to public speak certainly helps with these sorts of things, I think, too, because you are actually just talking to a camera almost, and not exactly to a bunch of people sitting in front of you wondering, oh, is this gonna be worth my time or not?
Well, the thing is, I'm not looking at the camera. Now I'm looking at the camera. Anyone looking at it thinks I'm looking them in the eye. But the trouble is, when you have a podcast like this, you tend to lolook at the pictures.
Yeah, right.
The person who's talking to you, which means you're looking downwards.
Yeah, I try to look at the camera because it gives the illusion that you're looking at the person. I found that's the most, it comes out the best. Yeah. I'm using a desk camera. It's a good one.
But see, my camera, my webcam is on top of the screen. It's just mounted up on top.
All right. So so back to living forward. I have a lot of listeners and people who do my meditations that are almost on the cusp of retiring or already retired, but they aren't sure what to do with their lives anymore. What advice would you give to them? You are older than most of them, for sure. So I think you might have a few things to say. Some good advice.
Well, my YouTube on my name, Arthur Thomas Ware, has been dealing with retirement. So there's heaps and heaps of videos they could watch on there. But generally speaking, I'd say this: retire as early as you can. Make sure that you have all of your big debts put out of the way. Don't go into retirement, for example, having a mortgage. Look after your health, whatever your age is now. Start working on that, because whether you realize it or not, the diminution of your energies is inevitable. So when you retire early, you can do those things that you wished that you had done but haven't had time to do until now. For example, you can travel the world. You can go on those long walks. You can perhaps, if you're wealthy enough, buy that yacht and cruise around the place, or the caravan and travel all over the country. But once you get to around about your mid 80s, and I know it seems a long way from but if you're going to retire at 65, I'd say don't. Retire at 60 if you can. I took voluntary redundancy at 59, thinking that was very employable and would get another job easily. I was promised a job. It fell through. I then took on many volunteer jobs where I just went along and helped people. For example, I was in a group called Mission Australia, I think, for a while, helping people to make out resumes and how to do interview skills and this type of thing. I got fed up with that and I moved on to something else. So you keep chopping and changing till you find something that suits you. You can do that in voluntary work, and who knows, even in voluntary work, it might lead you back into paid work, something that you like doing.
Tom, you look 20 years younger than you are. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, I'll tell you the secret. There is a secret. There's a few secrets, actually. First of all, I've been a gym junkie since I was 20, right? Now, by a gym junkie, I don't mean that I went every day to the gym and but I did go consistently. I started weight training at the age of 20 and built myself up. I mean, I'm a skinny little guy now, but I wasn't always like that. I was a big, hefty sort of fellow. Otherwise, you wouldn't get a job like Antarctic expeditioner.
Sure.
So anyway, I did that. So there's weight training. The other thing is do yoga stretches to keep your body supple.
Very important.
And also do meditation.
Meditation. So you have a meditation practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did see.
Morning and night.
I did see that. Can you explain it a little bit for everyone who's not really familiar or just kind of gets the Western ideas of it? Because you're pretty well
I'll give you an idea. I started getting interested in meditation when I took up automatic writing, but I didn't do much. I would sit there for a few minutes and nothing seemed to work. Your mind goes all over the place. And then in 1985, I thought, I'll do some concentration exercises. So I used to get my stopwatch and I would put it on and watch the second hand sweep around the clock. And I would try to do that for a full half hour in the morning and in the evening. And after 15 months of that, it was very arduous. I thought I could keep my mind on the tip of the second hand, perhaps 80% of the time, but it would keep wandering off. And I mentioned this to a friend at work. And funnily enough, this friend of mine at work was a meditator as well, but he never told me about this. And he was British, same as myself. He'd been born in England, but he'd got himself a combi wagon and driven right across Europe and ended up in India looking for the spiritual guidance. And eventually he found this thing called Vipassana meditation. So he told me, he said, Tom, a cat is terrific concentration. You just watch them watching a mouse hole. They're absolutely riveted. They won't move. Their concentration's there, but they'll never become enlightened. And he said, what you want to do is book yourself into a Vipassana retreat. This is what I did. There's a place in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney called Barma Jumi, and it's a Buddhist type meditation. And I can tell you this, it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life. Absolutely. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You take you swear that you will abide by the rules of the camp, which means total silence. You tippy-toe around everywhere. You don't talk to anyone. You don't look at anyone else in the eye. You become completely secluded. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You do an hour and a half's meditation. And then you go to breakfast. You have an hour and a half break, in which time you have breakfast. You can shower and shave and that sort of thing. Walk around the grounds. And then you're in for another 3 hours meditation in the morning. You get a little 10-minute break between each one. Then in the afternoon, you get more of it. And then in the evening, you do 11 hours meditation every day for 9 days straight, right? 9 days straight. But on the 3.5 day mark, you get to the stage, the meditation starts off very simply. And you've all heard of the breathing technique. You just concentrate on the breath going into your nostrils, coming out, going in, coming out. For 3.5 days, you do that. Keep bringing the mind back. After 3.5 days, your mind becomes quiet enough and ruly enough for you to be able to be introduced to the real technique. Now, the real technique is this. You have to sit down for 2 hours solid straight without moving an inch, cross-legged or kneeling or however you want to do it. And you're told to concentrate on that area below your nostrils and above your upper lip. And then the teacher, it's all done by audio tape, asks you to switch your entire attention to the crown of your head and feel any natural sensation there. It could be tingling, it could be warmth, it could be a throbbing, it could be anything indeed, but it has to be natural, no imagination. Well, as soon as you switch to there, you feel the top of your head, boom, because you're introduced to the first time to your own auric field. You know what an aura is, don't you?
Yes.
We all have an aura around us and interpenetrating at various levels. Most people don't realize that. So once that happens, the teacher then asks you to systematically move your attention, which is at that time about as big as probably a 50-cent piece on the top of your head. You move it slightly to one side until you get a sensation there. If you get no sensation, you stay there until you do, and then you move to another point, and you go all the way over the top of your head, down your face, and then gradually down your body. And it takes 2 hours to get right to the bottom of your body, all right? If you don't get any sensation, you stay there for a while and then move on. But the thing is, the next time you come, it's just a little bit easier. And then the next time, a little bit easier. By the time you get to about the 3rd day, you find something uncanny happening. You find that your concentration, your focus of attention is now moving inside your body, right? You're penetrating your body and going internally into it. And by the time you get to about the 4th or 5th day, it's quite eerie because it's like X-ray vision. You can feel all your teeth and gums and everything. You can feel the sensation as you bring your attention to them. And then when you get near the end of the time, the end of the day, your body can actually disappear altogether, and all you feel is your being coming into and going out of existence. And it feels like effervescent bubbles arising and passing away through your body. In other words, this so-called body is really an illusion. What it is how could you put it? Micro things coming into and going out of existence at an extremely high rate. But our senses deceive us and tell us the body is there. So this is the essence of Vipassana meditation. You learn what you are not. You learn what you are not.
Well, so what would you, with that being said, what would you tell people who say, I can't meditate, I can't sit still, my mind keeps going? Yeah, I know you've heard it before. What would you tell them, or what do you tell them?
What would I tell them? I would tell them to book themselves into a Vipassana meditation center or any serious meditation center. None of these 3-day things or go like that. You've got to go into a place. I can remember I read a book. It was by a British admiral who I used to send letters to, and he did 30 days in a Burmese retreat. And all he had to do for the 30 days he was there was to sit down cross-legged and look at the robe he was sitting in and observe the robe rising and falling as he breathed in and out. Can you imagine that? So
Yes,
the only breaks he got were to go to the toilet, go to shower and eat and so forth. The rest of the time he meditated. That was even harder than mine.
well, I would recommend it to anyone. I think too many people try to do it themselves and decide they can't. But when there's people around you, that energy is contagious, and you kind of just go with the flow. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, that's right. And the other thing is, for example, I've done 16 of those 10-day courses between 1986 and 2002. I haven't done any since then, but I can recall finishing one of them. And on the last day, the last afternoon of the last day, you come back to normalcy and you're allowed to talk with your other people there. And the jubilation is tangible. Everybody's just filled with so much energy and love. And then at the last session, the teacher, who's now deceased, by the way, a fellow called Mr. S.N. Goenka, he chants. He gives this chanting, this Indian chanting, and we're all sitting there with in the typical meditation pose, and I had my hands out like that, you know, the usual pose. And I could feel this tangible energy rising from the palms of my hand. It was almost as though it had weight in it. This feeling rising from the palm of my hand and going upwards to the ceiling as he was chanting. And it was tangible, palpable. Anyway, when we came out, I happened to mention this to one of the others, and he said, "That happened to me too, Tom." And another bloke said, "Yeah, me too." So the thing is, the energy in the whole room had been raised to the point where everybody felt the energy. But of course, once you come back out, that high lasts for 2 or 3 days, and then you gradually lose it as you get back into civilization. When you get back into civilization, all that calmness and I won't, you know, I'm immutable and you can't rattle me type of thing, that all goes out the window. You go back to normalcy.
But is it possible that you maintain it yourself, or have you been able to?
I think you do, because I've been into this, as I said, for nearly 40 years. And
Sure.
I don't fly off the handle. I don't get hurt if people ignore me or say rude things as much as I used to. You know, once upon a time I'd have been jumping up and down and arguing, but no, I've mellowed a lot, and I think it's probably two things: the natural aging process, but particularly the meditation and the change of philosophy as I've grown older.
What would you say, or would you be able to say that the meditation has helped your automatic writing, or did it have any correlation with improving or becoming more of a clear channel? What would you say to that?
Possibly more of a clear channel, as you say,
Hmm.
but I don't think it has an effect on the level, because if you read Neil Donald Walsh's books, and I can't emphasize enough how important they are. I've got 8 of them on my bookshelf here. And the very first one he wrote was back in 1994. And then he wrote another one about 2 years later. And then the third one about 3 years after that, I think. He had no idea that they would take off the way they did. But he had this very, very profound conversation with God, with all the sort of questions which people ask. And to my way of thinking, they are 3 of the most profound books on spirituality and self-knowledge that I've ever read. And I've read a awful lot of books, believe you me.
And so when you do your own automatic sessions, do you ever do them for clients, or do you do it just for yourself?
Just for myself, and only recently, since I started putting out that channel, Written from Silence, which only started a couple of months ago. But I did write books with the idea of getting them published.
Mhm.
And of course, in those days, you've got to remember the world was very different back in the 1960s and 70s. If you went along and told someone that you could take down automatic writing, you would probably be referred to a doctor who would refer you to a psychiatrist who would refer you to a insane asylum where you'd be filled with Valium for the rest of your life and put in a place where you do no one any harm. Because I'm pretty sure that a great many people in those asylums were just psychic. I heard voices in my
Mm.
head. So, voices in your head, that's dangerous. Put
Yes,
them away.
absolutely. For sure. And when you start a session, what does it feel like? Can you explain that a little bit? You touched on it in the beginning, but
Well, it's so easy now that I can just pick up a pen, right? Want me
okay.
to try? Want me to try some right now?
Yeah, get one.
Okay,
Can can
I'll ask.
can
I'll
you
ask.
get a message for me? Try to pull a message for me, or
Okay, righto.
this has basically become less forced over time. It seems like.
Okay, Hector,
All
you're
right.
asking a lot, Tom. But for Benton, you're doing just what you're. Oh, my writing's terrible. You're doing just what you're supposed to be doing at this moment.
All right. I
Oh dear.
mean, I've heard that before, so I guess I'll take that.
In other words, you're on track. Yeah, you're on
Well,
track.
that's actually nice to hear, reassuring. Um, so basically, when you complete a session, that's it. You put down the pin, it's done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's
And what's
no big
and
formality, but I do most of it by typing now because it's easier and much quicker.
wow, typing too, huh?
Well, you see, the reason I can say that is because I learned to type in the Navy way
Mm-hmm.
back when I was 18 years of age. And it was very severe the way they used to do it. You used to have to put your hand on a manual keyboard typewriter. They'd put something over your hand so you couldn't see, you couldn't peep, right? So you had
Mm-hmm.
to learn where the keys are. And if you did peek, you got to whack across the back of the knuckles by the chief petty officer. So after a while, you learned how to touch type because that was fundamental. If you were a radio operator in the Navy, you had to
Mm-hmm.
be able to sit in the radio room with headphones on, like I'm doing now, and listen to Morse code coming through, and type automatically. And the messages would come through in code. You couldn't guess what they were. So you had to be able to write five-figure digits down at high speed with the typewriter. So I became very capable as a touch typist, as most radio operators in those days did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a matter of just stepping over from handwriting to typing because typing is much faster than handwriting.
So, what kind of messages come through most often?
Well, I usually ask questions of how to run my life at the time, what decisions to make, and I get succinct, well, not succinct, I can get a whole page of writing about something straight away. No
And
trouble at all.
have you done any books that are just automatic writing?
Yes, I've written four books on automatic writing. First one was called Ghost Guidance and Automatic Writing.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was called. I'll just hang on. I'll hang on a bit, and I'll get them out of the bookshelf.
Okay, well, we'll hold on for a second, and I want to keep you here for now, but
Right.
I have more questions. So, No, you could go ahead. Go ahead and get that. I'll
Oh,
wait here.
won't be,
Go
just
for it.
be a second.
Yeah, I'll let you do it. All right.
Okay. Now here are the books. That's the first one,
Ghost
right?
guidance. Mm-hmm. Divine dialogue. All right. Very cool. And when did you first publish these or have them published?
None of them are published. None of them are published.
None of them are
This,
published. Oh, we
no,
have
no.
to fit
Here's another one.
InnerQuest. That's unfortunate. They should be.
And here's the one on Vipassana meditation.
I need to implore you to put these things on Amazon and get them on your channel. People will purchase them. It does work.
Well,
I think you have a lot to share.
yeah, I
So
thought about it.
what kind of stuff is on them? Since we
Well,
can't read them right now.
I think Where Are You Me comes about why I did the Vipassana meditation, and I was trying to work out where exactly in the human body is consciousness. Is there a
Okay.
particular aspect or certain area where consciousness exists? So I got my concentration down so fine that it was almost like a needle, you might put it that way. And I would penetrate through my head because that's where most of our consciousness seems to be.
Mm-hmm.
But wherever I went, the consciousness was always either above or below or the other side. And I worked out eventually there's no particular spot. Consciousness lies within our whole body. And there appears to be more consciousness in our bodies because we've got more molecules and more atoms closely combined in our brains than any other part of our body, which gives us the impression that we live in our heads. We're not in our heads at all.
We're
Make sense?
living. It does make sense. I have to ask you: the messages you receive ever challenge you?
No, not really. I'm not asked to do something untoward.
Well, I mean, challenge your belief, your pre-perceived or beliefs or your preconceived notions. Do they ever challenge those? Not like challenge you to do something.
No, not really. I was brought up in the UK.
Okay.
And left there in 1951. By that time, I wasn't a churchgoer, and of course, World War II was on. We had moved around a bit.
Sure.
I was put in various. The thing in England in the war is they moved the kids out of the big cities, and they were fostered out to various families. That happened to me 3 times. So you're always chopping and changing schools. I went to Protestant ordinary public schools. I went to a Catholic school for a whole year, and that made no difference to me. I got to the stage where my belief was this: there's a God who's made all this, but I think a lot of the other stuff's been made up. You know,
I have
born in sin and all this crap. I didn't believe that. Yeah, go on.
How old were you during the war years?
When the war started, I was 3.5. When it finished, I was 9.
And
so they were formative years.
What were your experiences like through that?
Well, the war was. I was born in London. Of course, I was born in southeast London, which was, I guess you could say, was Luftwaffe alley, really, because the planes used to fly over from France right over the top and drop bombs all over the place. So we had in our backyard what they call an Anderson shelter bunker. So every night you'd go down the shelter, and of course the planes would fly over, dropping their bombs. The searchlights would be searching all over the sky. The guns on the various common ground would be firing ack shells into the air. So it was more dangerous to be outside from the ack shells splintering and falling to the ground than the bombs falling, I reckon. But anyway, we got through that.
Yeah, I see that, but that must have left a little bit of trauma, perhaps.
Not really. Kids have no fear. I mean, we didn't used to worry about that. But grown-ups did, of course. In fact,
Sure,
I can remember
sure.
we used to build these anti-aircraft guns made out of pipes and wood in their backyards and pretend we were shooting at the bad guys, you know.
Wow. Right. So I have to so back to automatic writing. What
Yeah.
type of questions receive the deepest type of responses?
You mean from the public at large?
Well, yourself from the public, like when you ask something, what type of responses come through like the deepest or the most detailed?
It's difficult to say because there's so much, but the main thing is, and you hear it all the time, be true to yourself. Be true to
Mm,
your own self. What I've learned is if there's a difference between believing something and your experience of it, go with your experience, because your experience is the nearest you're ever going to get to truth. What
So one of your videos I really liked, you were talking about that and how people are so certain about what's true or not. Do you know the video I'm talking about? Where you're talking about people don't really know anything, and those are
not
the and I think you
was that the
said
one where I tell the story about the fellow going to the restaurant?
maybe the one it could have been the same one. I watched a bunch of them, but you were talking about religious bigots and how they believe things that they think is true, but it's really belief, and that people don't really know anything really, but except through our own experiences, and you can't really judge those.
Yeah, it's probably the same story, and I'll
All
run
right.
through it very quickly. A man is told by a good friend that there's a great restaurant in town. So he goes along to the restaurant and he stands outside. This is knowledge based on belief. He believes his friend, so he goes to the restaurant. But he still doesn't know what the food tastes like. So he stands outside and he looks through the windows and he can see them all being served, and they're tucking into their meals, they're smiling. Nobody seems to be leaving anything on their plate. Obviously, the food is good. This is knowledge based on research. But he still doesn't know what the food tastes like.
Hmm.
So he goes inside and he orders a meal. The meal arrives, he takes the first spoonful and he goes, "Oh, God, that's the worst food I've ever had. That's terrible, that's terrible." Now, his experience is that the food is horrible, but his friend's experience, who went earlier, is that food is beautiful. Both experiences are true to that person. So you can only go on your own experience as to what is true. It's not the whole truth, it's your truth. And you can never get beyond your own experience as far as truth is concerned. It's something worth bearing in mind.
Hmm. So, have people ever maybe dismissed your work? And if so, how do you react to that?
Well, I don't know about whether they've dismissed it, because if it's on YouTube, for example, they just scroll down, don't they?
Well, I mean, you're not. I'm saying that from someone who's very public. I guess you've never really been public with your automatic writing, have you?
No, no.
Why do you think that is? Many people who do, they, try to stand on a mountain and tell the world, and they do readings for people and just make it the center of their identity. How important is it to not make, spiritual gifts, I should say, the center of your identity and focus on something else? How has that been an important part of your life?
I think because I got into automatic writing in the late 1960s, and that long period, right through the 70s and through the 80s, it was dangerous to talk about things like automatic writing or clairvoyance or clairaudience or any of those things. That just wasn't on. It's only in this particular century that it's really taken off. You
Mm,
could go to a bookshop back in the 1970s, there would not be one book on self-knowledge or self-understanding. Now you can go to a bookshop and it'll be the most popular books in the place. There'll be people queuing up, leaning over your shoulder, grabbing the books, because everybody's into spirituality now compared with the old days. It's not the taboo it used to be. And I
and
think the taboo with me is because it's lasted simply out of habit, out of habit.
right, yeah, I guess in the old days, it was the spiritual section was just Bibles,
That's right. That's
and
exactly right.
now there's all kinds of stuff. They have a huge section or huge sections in bookstores that are just like spirituality. Some of it very good stuff, some of it awful stuff, but they have it.
And most of it written by people who are young enough to be my children.
Oh my God, you young enough to be your great grandchildren, I would say. There's a lot of those too.
I've
Um,
got great grandchildren, by the way.
oh, wow, that's I great grandchildren. Do you have any great grandchildren yet?
No. Fair go, mate. I'm not that old. You'd have to be
No.
about 120 to be.
Well, at this rate, you might make it.
Mm.
So, how would you say that it's benefited your life, this automatic writing gift?
It's probably made a big difference. Automatic writing has brought me into spirituality in a very deep way. I possibly wouldn't have got into meditation without it. Um, and it's about it. It's given me a great insight into what I am, and in conjunction with that, what everyone else is.
So, it has basically changed your sense of purpose.
Yeah, well, my sense of purpose has been very much the same since probably I wrote out a saying when I was doing public speaking, and it was the usual affirmation.
Hmm.
I am a great public speaker, interesting, moving, and above all effective. And I use this great gift to release suffering and to bring joy to others. Right? Now,
Hmm.
that's an affirmation which I probably wrote out the first time 40 years ago.
So
So,
many
yep.
people see the times that we're living in now as quite turmoil. How would you do you have a message for everyone that can help and maybe type kind of like help them with that?
I think, honestly, I believe this, that the world is becoming exponentially more spiritual. I mean, you've only got to look across the internet, the amount of people who are into spirituality without religion, without the trappings of religion,
Hmm.
seeking self-knowledge, seeking the answers. In fact, I was watching a video earlier on today about extraterrestrial contacts. There's a fantastic video by an Australian journalist being interviewed by somebody in America. It's a 2-hour clip, and he's
Hmm.
talking about how the extraterrestrials have really been kept under wraps as a secret for 55 years or so, particularly by the American government, to cover up some of the bloopers they made when they first were, came across aliens in that Area 51 business way back in 1949. And they've been trying to bluff the world. It's a hoax ever since, but nobody believes it.
My great grandfather was a chief warrant officer during World War II in California, and he said there was a time, and I think it was 1942, 43, where
Yeah.
they set them all in the table and called them in and said, "Gentlemen, in Roswell, we have an alien craft that crashed."
Yeah.
And he just kind of stopped it at that, because he wasn't there, but they briefed him, and he was the biggest no nonsense guy that
Yeah.
you could ever talk to. So he would
Yeah.
not have made anything like that up
That's right.
unless it was something happened because of the times he was from. He was, you know, he's passed away now, but yeah, it was a story he told me before, and yeah, he was a person you couldn't, no BS. I don't
Yeah.
think he barely laughed. Just
Yeah.
part. He wasn't mean. It was just part of his personality. And
Yeah.
no, he told me that story. I don't know what to make of it. Um, they could have maybe told him that story or them that story for another reason than if it actually happened or not. We don't know. But no, I thought that was interesting, and it's definitely been a thing that's been around for a long time, and with military people, because he was one of them,
Mm.
and
Mm.
he told me. Um, so so you've been around since the war yourself. You were a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
Um, People have an idea that now is a time where it's worse than it's ever been before. What would you
No.
say to that?
No. No way.
Yeah.
I mean, you look back in the days of World War II when Hitler was in power in Germany and Stalin was in power in Russia and Mussolini in Italy, and they were pretty ruthless people.
Yeah.
No, it's certainly not worse now. I mean, it's incredible that the 20th century, two huge wars, 1418 and then 3945. There's been nothing like that ever since. Nothing anywhere near as much as that.
And what would you say to people who think that we're headed towards that?
I don't think so. I believe that unless complete insanity reigns, for example, if one of the persons in power decided to nuke another power, I think there'd be enough people to say, no, mate, you're not going to do that.
Yeah, even around the
It might be,
person.
might
I
be
think so
somebody
too.
right up in the top military to say, no, we're taking charge here. Martial law, mate. We don't want idiots in government. Because if a war started today, the world would become uninhabitable for most of the species living on it for probably a
Mhm.
few thousand years. Only the cockroaches and ants will probably survive.
All right, so I want to ask you something else. Throughout your years, have you ever met or ran into people with any other spiritual gifts? And can you tell me about some of them?
I've only met two other people in my life who I think have had what you would call um, what's the term? A complete epiphany where they identify with everything. I remember one fellow,
Mm.
he finished a course, one of the courses I'd done up in the Blue Mountains. And he said to me, Tom, he said, I can't believe it. He said, I was sitting there meditating and suddenly my whole being rose up through the roof of the place. He said, and then I looked out over the world and I was everything. He said, I was everything. I was the leaves on the trees. I was the flowers. I was the birds. I was the air. I was everything. So he had experienced that. And I've only ever met one other fellow who's had the same experience. So it's very rare. But once experienced, changes your life forever because you realize what you really are in your essence.
All right, let's try another automatic writing experiment, if you don't mind. Um, let's do a message for everyone here and everyone who will watch this about being able to cultivate and expand their own spiritual or psychic ability the best way that they can. That's basically what my channel is about. So I want to, or I have a lot of people trying to do that. Let's see what kind of message we could get them.
Can you put it in a succinct
A simpler,
question? Simple, just
yes.
one sentence.
What is the best way for the individual to expand and improve their spiritual and psychic ability?
Okay. Here's the answer I get. It is obvious, Tom. Go within or you go without. Do this in silent moments. Silence really is God. I am with nothing else added.
All right. Thank you for that.
I think we better
So
call this.
yeah, we're almost finished. We are almost finished. I have a few more questions. Then we're gonna do our meditation for everyone here.
Yeah.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
what do you want people to carry with you after hearing this conversation? After everything we've talked about, what do you want people to remember?
The whole gist of it, actually, what we're doing here is we're trying to expand people's not just their beliefs, but their motivation, and to become more of their real self, and thereby become happier people, thereby making the world a happier place, because we do this one person at a time ourselves.
And what would you say to someone who feels that life is behind them?
Well, life is never behind them, because we are life. We are the life itself. We're not the body. We know the body is changing all the time. We know we are not, what we carry forward into the next life, of course, obviously, is our sense of being a what you might say, a spirit or a soul. What we carry beyond, according to a lot of the research, is we carry virtually everything with us, apart from the meat body, as they say. So we just transform. We just move up to another level.
And what is the next chapter for you, Tom?
The next chapter for me, something I haven't thought about a lot. As I said, I'm turning 90. I remember
Wow.
thinking to myself, with a bit of luck, I might have another few years left. I'll probably be doing much of the same that I'm doing now, but I obviously think to myself, something like this, what we've done today, is going to reach a lot of people, not simply because of my effort, but mainly because of yours. I think that your reach will expand enormously, because you're doing something needed. You're doing something needed and in demand. So that's about it.
Well, thank you. All right, so we're going to get into our meditation and healing. What I would like you to do is just do your regular thing.
Right.
I'm not sure if
How
you looked
long?
at
How
my
long
channel.
roughly?
Oh, about 10 minutes, 10,
All right.
15-ish minutes. And it'll basically expand to everyone else. Just be silent. I'll ask you to say a few words towards the end. And for those of you who have never been here before, just back straight, relax, do the best you can. You could even lie down for this because it's part purification, which is ideal. I'll explain it a little bit more to you later on, Tom. But basically, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. You're gonna hear me speak some Japanese, and then I'll switch it. I'll hand it over to Tom, and you will finish us up. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. Here we go. Amaterasu mi oyano kami no misu maru no inochi terashi kuni shizuka nari amaterasu mi oyano kami no misu maru no inochi terashi kuni shizuka nari. No worries. Amaterasu mi oyano kami no misu maru no inochi terashi kuni shizuka nari. Taka amahari ni kamazumarimasu. Kameraki, kamerami no mikoto moshite, sumemi oyakamu, izanagi no kami tsukushi no himaku no tachibana no odo no awagigahara ni misoki, harai, tamaishi, toki ni are maseru. Harai do no okami tachi, moromoro no maga goto tsumi kairi yo. Harai tamai kiyome tamai to masugoto no yoshi yo. Amatsu kami, kunitsu kami, yao, yoruzo no kami tachi to mori hikoshi masato, kashikomi, kashikomi, momausa, taka amahari ni kamazumarimasu, kamarogi, kamaromi no mikoto mo shite, sumemi oyakamu, izanagi no kami tsukushi no himaku no tachibana no odo no awagigahara ni misoki, harai, tamaishi, toki ni are maseru. Harai do no okami tachi, moromoro no maga goto tsumi kairi yo. Harai tamai kiyame tamai to mausu koto no yoshi yo. Amatsu kami, kunitsu kami, yao, yoruzu no kami tachi tomo ni hikoshi masu to, kashikomi, kashikomi mo mausu. Doso no kami, amatera shimasu. Sumemi kami no memori o tsutaete oshie michibiki no tamawaku. 人はすなわち、神と神とのもとの主たり、何時らの真摯の痛ましむることなかれ。この故に目にもろもろの風情を見て、心にもろもろの風情を見ず、耳にもろもろの風情を聞いて、心にもろもろの風情を聞かず、口にもろもろの風情を言って、心にもろもろの風情を言わず、身にもろもろの風情に触れて、心にもろもろの風情に触れず、心にもろもろの風情を思とも、中心にもろもろの風情を思わず、この時に清く潔きことあり、もろもろののれは影と形のことし、清く清ければ汚れることなし、ことをとらばうべからず、皆花よりずの実となる。我が身はすなわち六根処女なり、六根処女なるがゆえに、ごぞの真君兄なり、ごぞの真君兄なるが、ゆえに天地の神とどこなり、天地の神とどこなるが、ゆえに万物の霊と体なり、万物の霊と体なるが、ゆえになすところにごて成就せずということなし、無常霊法、真珠仏教、天上無休、名入賞、考え率、払いたまい、清めたまい、守りたまい、先はいたまい、照らしたまい、導きたまい。高間の腹にかむずまります。すめ神たち、家はらしたも、特殊の水の宝持ちて、余っている国てるひけ雨のほあかり、くしたま、にぎはやひのみことに、静けたもこと教えて、のたまわく、今しこの水の宝持ちて、中つくにに雨下り、あう人ぐさ沈め収めよ。あう人ぐさおよび、よりずのものの病のことあらば、かむ宝を持ちて、見くらいた沈みに起きて、見たま沈みの祭りをなして水の宝を振るべ、そのかむほぎの言葉に曰く、木のい木のと、火のい火のと、土のい土のと、かのいかのと、水のい水のと、ひふみよいむなやことにのとふるべゆるいらかく祈りせばまかるともさらにきなんとしても雨の神の身を読みことのりかけとめいて雨の岩船に乗りて河内の国の川上の怒る画面に天下りましまして、大和の国、引きの山のふもと、白庭の高庭に移しましまして、月祭りとも名付けて、イスの神のお神と申し立て祭り。よよ噛む宝を持ちて、よるずの者のために、古べの噛むごと持ちて、探すなしとゆえの古の見た目の神と、敬い、立て祭り、せめみことおむらじ、おとろその神たききを持ちて、いつきに使い祭りとも、物のべの神の社、雨がした、よりずの者の手声なり、いてんもっと噛む宝は、いわゆる、おきつ鏡、へつ鏡、やつくの剣、いく玉、たる玉、まかる返しの玉、知恵返しの玉、おろちのひれ、八のひれ、くすぐすのもののひれ、さらにとくすの神、木のい木のと、火のい火のと、土のい土のと、かのいかのと、水のい水のと、ひふみよいむなやこと。にのとふるべ、いらといら、かしたてまつることのよしをもちて、平ら結局きこしめせと、命長く子孫羽、時はかきわに、 Mamori tamai, sakiwai tamai, kaji tate matsuri, jinsu jimyo shin nikikaji. All right, Tom, go ahead and take over.
Thank you for that. I've really enjoyed this time we spent together. I hope it's a benefit not only to you, but to all of those who have been listening in, and that something really positive will come out of it for all of us here today. Thank you, Benton. It was a pleasure to be here. And with that, I'm going to say adieu.
All right, thank you so much. And where can people find you?
Well, you've given on that site earlier on. I gave you the various links. You should still have that. So if you could post that, that would be fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming here and sharing your wisdom with us. And yeah, I hope that you know at least put those books that you wrote up on Amazon so everyone could read more about you and learn more. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Benton. See you later. Bye
See
bye.
you. Bye. All right. So there we have it. What I respected the most about that conversation is about how honest and grounded Tom is. He's not trying to attach this ability as, I should guess, part of his identity, where it's like he's that's centered around him. You know what I mean? So I think the biggest thing we could take from that whole thing is whether someone here's does their work through automatic writing and meditation, and whether it's from the subconscious, something else, or intuition, inner guidance. The invitation is the same, right? And I try to teach this too, slowing down, listening deeply, and living forward. Um, yeah, I just want to thank Tom again. And this has been Folklore After Dark. I will see you next time.